It's all yours.
All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to another live coaching call with Nido Marketing. We've got Qasim here today. He's going to give us the spiel from the digital marketing standpoint of the Montessori admissions funnel. So we had Lise last week open up this topic, which is step 5 of our 12 steps to Montessori marketing. And so now we're really going to get into the details of best practices when it comes to marketing and what that looks like in, all of our marketing channels and avenues. So Qasim, welcome. I'm happy to have you back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so talk to us. Are you going to do any screen sharing or?
I'm going to do a lot of screen sharing.
Okay, cool.
Yes, maybe too much actually, Denise. So pull me back if what I start to share gets too granular, because I don't want to distract from the purpose here. And I have the bad habit of maybe doing that, diving a little too deep. So disclaimer made.
Sounds good. Well, and I do think like the details of what you can offer are really helpful because, again, you're coming from like an objective outside perspective, and it's really good for us Montessorians to be able to continue to bring those perspectives in so we can really broaden, our reach and really getting those prospective families that we otherwise wouldn't.
Awesome. So like I was telling you before the call started, this is what I do professionally in my day job, quote unquote. I own a little agency called Solutions 8, and digital marketers are obsessed with funnels. That's all we do. And you're going to hear constantly, if you're in any marketing, circle, we're talking about like fixing your funnel or the failed funnel or, the new funnel, or we have this idea for a funnel. And the reason for that really is a funnel is just, it's just a two-dimensional representation of the relationship that you're building with somebody. And that's the way to look at it, especially for Montessorians, because the concept of the funnel tends to sterilize people. It sort of turns them into numbers, like, oh, I've got a 16% conversion rate from this stage to that stage. And I realize that instantly places kind of a disassociation between you and the prospect, and we don't want to do that. Really what the funnel is doing is it's tracking your efficacy at building a relationship with the prospect. And this might get a little weird, but you could actually build a funnel around real relationship building. So like the very beginning of the friendship funnel might be, oh, I learned this person's name, right? Like you go to the coffee shop and there's a barista there and you see him there all the time. And it's like, hey man, what's your name? And now like, that's the first stage in the funnel. And then the second stage in the funnel might be identifying something that we have in common, like, oh, you go snowboarding, I go snowboarding, and so on and so forth. And if you start to look at it that way, it actually gets really fun, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm a dork. But it gets really fun because you begin to identify the common denominators between every single parent that's ever come into your school. Now, not every parent fits in the same funnel. You might have multiple funnels. As a matter of fact, you probably do. It's probably per program. So we're going to talk about like the funnel as a generic point of view, but a point of reference. But as Montessorians are performing some of these tasks, and again, we're going to get really tactical on this call, realize that you can have multiple funnels. My advice to you would be build one first, like your general funnel. We'll call it your general admissions funnel, bringing new parents in and getting them to sign up. And then if you want to build subsequent sort of smaller micro funnels, the funnel within the funnel, if you want to get, funnel inception, then you can do that. But let's start with one. Is that a good advice? And anything you'd add to that?
It is. And can you talk to about, so the funnel, where are we funneling to, right? So like that we start with the initial interaction, and then what's the end goal? Is that conversion every time, or are there other variations?
That's such a good question. And my answer is going to be really frustrating, but it'll help kind of encapsulate what a funnel is. It's really what you decide. So we could build a funnel just to get people to take a tour. And the top of the funnel is they know nothing about us, and the bottom of the funnel is they've taken a tour and bam, we're successful. Now, I believe that our funnel should probably lead to enrollment. Signed, sealed, delivered. I have a new student in class. But really, your actual funnel goes all the way through, not just from enrollment to ascension, to advocacy, and then alumni. So it's just where you choose to take the picture. It's the start and the end point. And speaking of pictures, I have one here.
So is it fair to say like it's the bottom of the funnel is like, what do we want them to do?
Yes.
And then
the bottom of the funnel is what
above that is the process we get, or they go through to get to what it is we want them to do.
You said that so much better than I did. Yes, that's exactly right. Are you looking at a picture of a funnel right now? Did I share the right screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. So these stages are stages that we defined, and by we, I mean me and Matt. Your stages can be different, and there's a semantic issue here. The minute you start labeling it, it sort of sterilizes what's exactly going on. So going in order, what we think the Montessori admissions funnel looks like is obviously starts with awareness. And what this means is people are actually starting here. They're starting right above awareness, which means they know nothing about you. They probably know nothing about Montessori, or if they do, they might think it's a cult, or they think it's something that's, not necessarily right for them, but just assume that they know nothing. And then the minute they enter your funnel, they're just in this vague zone of awareness. And this is a really sensitive period in anybody's interaction with a new brand or concept, because it's where you start to form your opinions. And I won't delve into like the psychology or the psychological studies that have been done, but I think that it's an axiom that once people begin to form opinions, it becomes really difficult to get them out of those preconceived notions and those preconceived opinions.
We all experience that in the Montessori world.
Yeah, they're just, we just immediately cement ourselves like, well, this is what I've decided. And so the reason that we have such a strong emphasis on content at Nido Marketing is because of this, because this phase is, I don't want to call it make or break it, because you can turn people around, but it's just so important that when they are interested, you give people the content that is necessary for them to properly educate themselves. From awareness, they move into interest, which means that this might be a solution I'm interested in at some point. I don't know when. Maybe I don't have children yet. I just got married. My wife and I are talking about, what we would do. And we know that Montessori parents are A-type enough to have those thoughts in their mind. Interest is a dangerous place for us as marketers, because you can spend a lot of time on interested prospects and they never go anywhere. And that's your fault, not theirs. They never came to you and said, oh yes, I'm going to enroll this summer. They're just like, oh, I'm interested in learning more about Montessori. And you could sit at that table all day. And because they're interested, they'll listen to you all day. But they might not be where you want to invest all your time, effort, energy, and money. So we want to make sure that we have content for awareness. We want to make sure that we have a lot of assets to help move people through from awareness to consideration. Interest is the bridge. So I wouldn't spend too much time in interest. Consideration is actually when they're thinking about the solution that they're going to employ. So do I want to hire a nanny? Should I stay home? Are we going to a daycare? Do I want a Montessori school? And consideration can take some time. So really, this is where I think a lot of Montessorians assume the funnel begins, because this might be the first time you actually hear from a parent. Mm-hmm. Awareness and interest tend to take place elsewhere. They take place online, community forums, talking to friends, family, and neighbors. They're not talking to solution providers yet. They're just getting kind of a sense as to what's going on with the world. And then consideration is the very first time you might tap a vendor. And they're not scheduling a tour, they're not downloading anything, but they might have a soft question. And so this is when you first start to hear from them. At intent, this is when they're going to make a decision. So they know I'm going to choose something, and now they're doing things like potentially, downloading Lead Madness or engaging with higher level copy, or potentially scheduling a tour that's really moves further down to evaluation. But the tour lives somewhere between intent and evaluation, and sometimes honestly after evaluation. So somebody can come and take a tour and then walk away. And oftentimes I believe that they do. And they're still in the evaluation phase. So, far too often we look at the tour as like, oh, okay, we got evaluation out of the way. Now what do you think? And we don't realize that they're still there, even though we're beyond it. And then there's enrollment. And each of those phases, what's really interesting about them is each of them has a catalyst and a goal. And what I want to talk about today, and what I want everybody to get really good at, is defining what the catalyst is and what the goal is. Because far too often we distract ourselves and we distract our prospects from what that goal is. So I'm going to pause there, Deneen. I feel like, was that too much, or is that good?
No, keep going. This is really, really, really important, because it comes down to the decision.
Yeah.
And the decision is so important. And I think we can kind of talk everyone's ears off. But if we lose sight of the decision, then it's awkward when you get to the decision, because you're like, all right, now I have to navigate all the things we just went through and like go to the point, and that can be tricky. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this and how you do that well.
Awesome. So most of my advice is going to come from the traditional business world, which, to be honest with you, I think is good. I think Montessorians are great at, content, thought leadership, authority, loving people, helping. I think what they could get better at is maybe just a little tactical salespersonship. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I want to point out is Matt did a webinar on this that's amazing. So we have a blog on the Montessori admissions funnel that's worth reading. It's really robust, as you can see. And then if you're a member, and this is free for all of our members, but you can click through to the link and then you can see the webinar, and it's robust. It's a half-hour long, and he really dove deep, and we give away the slide deck. So if you have any interest, I'd recommend the webinar. What I'd like to share is this is the sales process of my agency. This isn't anything I've ever shown a client in my entire life. And I don't know that I would, other than I want people to see the way that we canvas this. So what you'll notice is this is a funnel. Now, it's not tapering, but really your funnel is just a checklist of the things that you think that people need to do in order. It's chronologically like these are the things that people probably need to do before they're able to buy from us. And so the Solutions 8 funnel, it starts with what we call an MQL, a market qualified lead. But each of these columns, you'll notice that there's 5 columns here. This is the input. This is the catalyst. And then this is the output. So we have what they're doing to enter the funnel and then the goal. And this is what I want to get to for everybody. Every stage of your funnel has a goal. So if we're at the awareness stage, the goal might just be learn more about Montessori. But you want to drive people to a logical end sequence. And then once they get there, know that this has shifted. And so, if our awareness stage wants them to learn more about Montessori, when they're in the awareness stage and they're learning more about Montessori, maybe every single one of your blogs ends with a very distinct call to action. Look, if you're really interested in finding more about Montessori, we have this 7-series video on, the things you have to know about Montessori, whether or not it's right for your child or whatever. And then they opt into that, and now you've moved them down. And then they're in the series, and then the series asks them to do something else. You'll notice a few things. So the first one is, let's say that a new lead comes into Solutions 8. They've given me, and I list it here. This is what I have. So this is, again, catalytic. I have a name, email, and phone number. Without a name, email, and phone number, they're not a market qualified lead. And you have to decide this as a school. What do you need at a minimum for somebody to be considered a prospect? And that list might be great, big, and long, and it might be really narrow. But you have to decide until they reach this point, they're not a prospect. And your nomenclature is going to be a little bit different. We have leads and prospects, and then market qualified leads and sales qualified leads. But you want to really define what information you need before you're willing to consider somebody a prospect. And then don't move them to the next stage until you have all that. And this is where we get into a lot of trouble, because sometimes you'll skip steps. So it's like, well, I don't know how many children they have. I don't know the age of their children. I don't know what program they're interested in, but they did ask for a tour. And sometimes if we're really desperate, we'll do that, but it's like you're breaking your process. And when you break your process, you have a really difficult time you're actually doing them a disservice, because the thought leadership and the authority that you should be able to assume, you can't now. You can't speak to them the way that they need to be spoken to in order to be properly educated. So don't break your process. So for me, a market qualified lead has to have these 3 things. I have people chatting all the time that don't want to give us a phone number. It's perfectly fine. I'll add you to my email list. But, we have a really hard time providing an action plan without a phone number, because there's so many things that come up, and I need the opportunity to reach out to a decision maker. I totally understand if you're not comfortable right now, but if that's the case, then we're probably not the right fit. That conversation can be had as a Montessori school. How do you feel about that, Deneen? Does that feel too combative?
No, well, and we need phone numbers because that's the relationship building piece. And I think that's part of the pushback we get when we ask people to do Calendly because they want to call them first. They want to actually have the conversation to figure out if you really are a good fit and ultimately worth the time to do the tour with, right? Mm-hmm. So if we don't collect that information and kind of gauge them, but also know what age their child is and where they're at in the region, then we may be wasting our time and spending our valuable resources on that. I know a lot of schools do collect this kind of informally. So do you see some really good ways to collect this information without just someone calling you?
So many good ways. Yes, I have a whole thing queued up. It actually lives inside of our CRM, but you wouldn't need our CRM to do it. And I wanted to touch on something that you said that I think is really important. As the school, you're in charge of the stage of the funnel. So parents can take all the actions that they want. You get to decide when they move, which is a really important It's just a really important thing to remember, because oftentimes, especially when we're dealing with customer service, you feel like, oh my goodness, that, oh, they want to buy it. Like, goodness, I have to do the thing. And I want to always get my clients out of that mode and out of that zone. And then we say, hey, so excited to work with you, but here's our process. So again, at Solutions 8, we don't take on a new client without having first done an action plan. And I really mean that. Somebody test me on that. Somebody, if you're watching the recording of this video, call my agency and try to just hire us. Say, hey, I want to sign up right now. Send me a contract. We won't do it. We have to do an action plan, and we have to see whether or not we can actually make an impact. And you know what? For every one person that gets a little teed off at that, 9 out of 10 of them are really grateful. I'm like, man, that's great. That's just awesome that you guys do that, because it makes us feel so much more comfortable with the agency. Anyway, I'm not selling my agency. I'm sorry.
Well, what you're doing is you're giving, you're qualifying the candidate, and you're creating clarity in your relationship until you actually purchase, right? And then you decide. It's a mutual understanding that, yeah, this is going to work. The expectations have been clear from the start. And when we veer off of that path, that's where it gets really murky.
Absolutely. I think Matt told me at one point, especially when they had just an insane waiting list, but at one point they required, and they might still, and you'll know this, Deneen, but I think they required in-home interviews. Like, you can't apply until we've done an at-home interview just to make sure that we're the right fit and we're mission appropriate. It's sort of protecting the herd type of thing.
Yeah, that was that early, I think infant for sure, because he just opened up a Nido. And then probably toddler as well. I'm not so sure about primary, but yeah, that was program specific for sure, which a lot of schools do actually. And I think that's a great idea.
I love it. Yeah. As a parent, it makes me feel really safe.
Yeah. Right. And that the school is invested in wanting to know who you are.
Right. Yeah. I'd be running around cleaning up right beforehand, but
I'm sure there's probably some from the parent side, I feel like I'm going to be judged, but that's where you come in and make sure that you make them feel comfortable and not judged.
Well, and it's the way that you present it too. I think, we're going to put you under a microscope. So one of the things I wanted to point out, I just kind of want to explain the construct. So we have the columns here. You can see what input is required to achieve a stage. You can see, once I'm at this stage, what action is taking place, and you can see what goal we're moving towards, and what the output is when somebody has accomplished that goal, or what they need to do to accomplish that goal. Now, a couple really important notes. One, I've got automated action and manual action. So there are things that happen on an automated basis. You're getting these emails. We've got a school that sends out these really wonderful packets, Valley Forge. They send out these and they're awesome. And I mean, it's got to be costly to print out what they do and send them, but it's just so impactful. So whatever's happening on an automated basis, you want to make sure that that's just in queue and in play. And this is really important because it's going to keep you from getting overwhelmed. The tough thing about marketing is you have to field the leads. So many schools are like, oh goodness, if we just had the interest, and they don't realize that no, when the interest comes in, it's going to get harder, not easier, because you have to deal with all of them. And so having automated systems to deal with that is going to be really critically important. So know what has to happen on an automated basis. Most of this you can set it for free, and make a list. So you have your list. You know what your first stage is. What's the very first thing that happens when somebody comes in? What should you do on an automated basis? What should you do on a manual basis? What's your outreach look like? Are you calling? Are you texting? Are you emailing? Are you inviting them to events? What's that do? And make it a template. And this is the other thing that I think really repels people is templatizing relationship building feels sterile, but it's not. You just know what works. You know what works. So it's like, hey, every time I've ever invited a parent to, one of our what are those morning coffee things that some of our members do?
Parent cookies.
Yeah, the parent coffee things. They just really get such a kick out of it. Let's just make that the trend, the thing. And I think it would be so cool to take prospective parents and then invite them to come hang out with, the real parents and just get a sense, behind the iron curtain. So you want to know, at this stage, we begin taking these actions until we achieve this goal. This is a really critical, important part too. And this is a part that's actually kind of disheartening. As soon as you achieve this goal, stop doing these things. And here's the problem is so many people, I'm not talking Montessori schools, businesses keep going because they're like, well, gosh, I wrote 20 emails. I want you to get all 20 of them. I have all these assets. I created all this stuff. You haven't even come to the event yet. But unless it's one of your prerequisites, unless it's one of your pre-qualifiers, and it shouldn't be because that should be the goal, stop selling. So the whole rule is stop selling when you hear yes, because you can absolutely oversell. And we've all been there. We've all been to the car dealership where it's like, oh, I might buy this car. And then the salesman talks you out of it 2 minutes later. So and I hate to liken Montessori schools to car sales, but you know what I mean? And just in terms of the analogy is concerned, stop selling as soon as you hear yes. This goal has been accomplished. We know exactly what it takes to achieve this goal. And then we move to the next stage. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So let's put it, can you go back up for a second?
Yeah, please.
So stage one, if these are like mini funnels inside of the stages, right?
What a great way to put it. They run horizontally and the funnel runs vertically. So this is kind of the things that need to take place in order to drive people down the funnel. So but it does have kind of its own like automated system.
Got it. Okay. All right. Keep going. I was just curious.
Awesome. So if somebody's a market qualified lead, then we have this information. The minute they've requested their action plan, which means they have to fill out this form. I even have the form here for my staff, so they know exactly which one it is. Then they're a sales qualified lead. So the action plan has been requested. We submit that request internally to our specialist who's now working on the action plan, and they just become a sales qualified lead. And we do something that I think is pretty brilliant. Most agencies, when you're working with an agency, you ask them for an action plan and they say, great, I'll be right back. And then they disappear and they're gone for who knows how long. And it's just crickets and you're left to your own devices. You're now Googling around and figuring things out and talking to other people. I talk to you every single day. So you ask me for an action plan and I'm going to come back and I have a list of things. It's a bullet points. It's 16, 17 items long. Some of them are applicable, some of them aren't. But I'll come back and I'll check like your website site speed. Or I'll look at your competitors and see if I find one that's just really good. Or, you know what I mean? Like I come back with a list of things that every single day I reach out and said, hey, by the way, we're working on your action plan. I just wanted you to know this, or I just wanted you to have this. Or I was just curious about this. And those things aren't relevant to the action plan. It's not that I don't care, I do, but they wouldn't be necessary for us to complete the action plan. But what I'm doing is building a relationship and touching that prospect every single day. So when the action plan is complete, they're ready to hear from me. Montessorians need to do the same thing. Here's what happens is a parent schedules a tour, and then maybe we call and follow up to confirm the tour, but then we never talk to them again. And that tour could be 2 weeks out. So this parent has scheduled a tour and they're really excited. You're really excited when you do stuff like that, by the way. Think about your own buying experience for anything. Anytime you take any action, there's actually a dopamine hit to it. I won't dive too deep into that either, but you can amplify that dopamine hit. It's why we use order bumps. But when somebody has done something, they're excited. And then that excitement starts to wane. And it will naturally, just because that's how people function. But if somebody schedules a tour today and their tour is in 2 weeks, they need to be touched. And you can actually automate a lot of this. So one of the things that we just built into our Montessori CRM is a pre-tour nurture. And it's awesome. It's only 3 emails long. But we send people a survey that we ask them to fill out saying, hey, we want to maximize the value of your time here. We really want us to, to be able to give you everything that you want. If you wouldn't mind, fill out this quick survey. It's 5 questions. And things like that. And then when they fill out that survey, now that's the opportunity for you to follow up manually. And you get to come back and say, hey, I noticed that you said this. This is so interesting to me because, and if they're coming in, even in a couple of days, just touch them a couple of times. And what you're doing is you're breaking down this barrier because when they first come into the school, that's the first time they've ever heard your voice. Like if that's the first real interaction they've ever had with you, you now have multiple things to sell. You're not just selling Montessori. You're also selling this process and you're selling yourself. They have to know to first get you and get over that hump and then get over the process of the fact that we're doing this tour and then start diving into Montessori. If you can get some of those things out of the way in the very beginning, introduce yourself, hear your voice, maybe see your face if there's, the opportunity to send them a video that's really smart, and then explain to them what's going to happen. Here's what you can expect. This is so important. We treat people like they're intelligent, and we should because they are. But really deep down from a buying perspective, and I think this comes from Dan Kennedy. I forget who said this. I'll remember hopefully before the end of the call. Oh no, it's StoryBrand. Whatever his name is, the guy who runs StoryBrand, Don Miller. Don Miller talks about the way that we speak to people from a 0 to 10 scale, 10 being, triple PhD and 0 being grunts and throwing stones. We tend to speak at a 7 or an 8. So we're talking to them on close to a collegiate level at a minimum. We should be at a 2. And the reason for that is because they don't know your industry. They don't know your nomenclature. They don't know your semantics. They don't know your process. They've never been exposed to any of this before ever. And we're now not only trying to hurdle all of these new things that they're experiencing, but teaching them all new things. So teaching them what to expect. And I mean, hey, here's where you should park. This is really important. Actually, one of my competitors does this. It's brilliant. When you sign up to do a consult with him, he sends you a video of himself in the parking lot. And then he says, hey, this is Qasim. I'm in the parking lot of my building. As you can see, we're right back there. You're going to want to park on this side because my entry is on the side of the building instead of the main. And then you're going to go in, and you could literally walk them into your school, show them where to park, where to go, who they're going to greet. And all you're doing is you're breaking down barriers, because we don't realize it, but those things they're nerve-wracking, right? Like when you pull up to a new place and you don't know where to go and you don't know where to park, you're not consciously thinking to yourself like, oh, I'm not going to the school because I'm so nervous about where to park. But it's just one of those things that, like, on the monkey mind level, just in terms of subliminal influence, kind of gives you just a negative impact or feeling. And if you can get rid of that and really position them for success, and it doesn't take long at all, that's the type of thing that's really going to move people towards the goal, which is where you want them to go and what you want them to do. I'm going to pause there, Deneen. Did any of that land well?
All of it did. I mean, I think that's so important. I love the video idea too, because I'm thinking about how busy parents are. Like all of the things you described in that video that your competitor does, if that was put in text, I don't know if many parents would read it, but if you had a 2 or 3 minute video that touched on all those topics that you would have otherwise written, I think that's much more engaging. And then you also know the information that they have before. So you are now more prepared, and you've covered that, and you may reiterate it during your tour, but you at least know that that's out there, and you can focus on, really selling the school and showing them all the neat features that you have on the tour. So that's kind of put out of the way. And then you optimize your time as well.
Absolutely. And you just said something that I love, because it sort of speaks to something I wanted to talk about anyway, but you have a collection of assets available to you. And I mean, as a school, you already have those. And by the way, Nido has a massive amount of assets for you. And I'll give you an example of one of my favorites. We just produced this. It's the school comparison checklist. I saw another school doing this. They weren't a Montessori school, but a preschool. And I just thought it was brilliant. So we kind of stole the idea, borrowed it. You have assets available to you. The more things that you can give that are of value, the higher you're going to rank as a thought leader. So here's our school comparison checklist. And there's just items, and you could rewrite this, revise it, or, trash it and make your own. But they're, how well does the school do at communication? What's the environment like? And for each one of them, there's a column or 3 columns. So now you can compare 3 different schools. And basically what you're doing is saying, here's the gold standard. Obviously, we meet all of these. Best of luck to you on your other tours. But what's nice as a parent, I as a parent would take this and I would actually have it. I'd keep it with me, because this would be something that I think is referential. And there are no rules when it comes to what makes a good preschool, except the rules that you define. And you get to define them and hand them straight to your parent. And so for every single one of these stages, know what assets you want to give people. Here's a checklist for, shopping for a school. And then here's an evaluation sheet when you're on your tours. And, and by the way, we have, and here's the other thing too, is remove all barriers to entry. So when they come for their tour, hand them your tuition. Make sure they have it. You can send it to them beforehand, actually, which is something that Matt does. But any question you've ever had, those are really good opportunities for you to, you can send them with your admissions documentation, assuming you want to, your enrollment agreement. Hey, here's a legalese. I know this takes a long time to go over. I didn't want this to be an issue, so I want to hand it to you now so you have the opportunity to talk to it, so that when we schedule our follow-up, there are no questions or issues. But make sure that you're using these assets and whatever assets you have prepared in your school, and you know where they belong. And you can actually hit some assets multiple times. And that's okay too. That's okay to keep going back to something if it's of immense amounts of value.
I love that new, what was it? The school comparison chart? Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the school comparison checklist.
Checklist, right. So what I love about this, which it actually does exist state to state. So in Minnesota, there's something called Parent Aware, and they already come up with this criteria, and their sole purpose is to help parents make a decision for childcare. So it's interesting because a lot of their criteria does not align with what it is we do. So Montessori schools don't typically come up. And that's a problem, because they can access many parents and many prospects. So as a school, what you can do is take this and change the narrative and really show that you're empathetic to the process. A parent goes through to make the decision of where to send their child, but you're also like, you're controlling the narrative and you're helping them understand, well, what is important in the evaluation. And I would, if you do have an organization like Parent Aware or something similar in your state, I would cross-check it too, because you don't want to be totally different, because then you're skewing it and they'll read right through that. But I love this because it just gives parents the power, right? It empowers them to make the decision that they need to make.
Well, to make sure you're fighting on your terms too. I mean, because in a world where we're competing, and we're competing against these 2 or 7 or 20 other schools, you want to set the terms. That's the best way to win any game, is to make sure that you get to define the rules. And we're not here to fight fair. Like, I'm not going to fight fair with KinderCare, because I know for a fact the Montessori school is going to treat a child better than KinderCare is. So as many ways as we can possibly get around having to approach them on their terms and their standards. And I'm sure there's a way to say what I just said to Nina in maybe a more Montessori way, but we want to write the rules, and this is the way to write the rules. And honestly, the way that I would do this, I'd have my school logo here, and I'd put a great big green check in every one of these boxes. So it's just a nice visual to let parents know, like, hey, I'm school number 1, you go check school 2 and 3, and let's come back and talk about your options.
Or even put your name in there, and then school 2, school 3.
We've got notes here, sections for notes as well. So if anybody wanted that asset, that's available.
Well, and this touches on the topic of traditional versus Montessori, and I think we all kind of try to figure out how to best articulate that we are so much better than other traditional settings, but do it in a way that's obviously like humble and modest. But this could be one of those talking points and elements and assets you have with that topic in mind, right? Absolutely. Like, how are you going to message that Montessori is so different than what you, parent, have experienced in your school setting, but also what our competitors are offering?
I also wanted to point out that we have a white paper on traditional versus, there it is, Montessori versus traditional school. Sort of the point that you just made, there shouldn't be a question a parent can ask that doesn't have a response from a school that is wrapped. And what I mean by that is people don't like off-the-cuff answers. When they ask a question, they really like to know, like, oh, let me go to the shelf and pull this off and show you what I have pre-prepared. I hear this often referenced as being the source of the source. So when you're the source, they can only trust the answer as much as they trust you, and they can't trust you at all because they don't know you very well. But when you're the source of the source, it's actually what's wrong with news today, right? Like, the minute, if I tell you, like, oh my goodness, this thing happened, well, maybe you trust me, maybe you don't. But the minute the news says it, it now becomes, for some weird reason, like the absolute, total, complete truth, even though the news isn't very trustworthy on any level. And I'm not attacking any one of them. I think that all of them have had some issues. So maybe we can use that for good and realize that being the source of the source gives you an opportunity to hand them something that they're just more likely to trust and believe. And with the assets available at Nido specifically, and then I'm sure the amount of content that some of these schools have available, every question they have should have a source of the source answer.
Mm-hmm. And doing it in a way that, again, like, go shop around. It's important to shop around. Oh, yeah. So it's important to compare and contrast. And we know they're doing it anyway, but if we can really give them the tools to do it, that gives us an edge. Let's do it.
Yeah. Guide them on how to shop. I think that's really important too. So this, I think I've exhausted maybe the value here, but it continues to go until we reach our final goal, with the funnel being onboarding complete, at which point you start a new funnel, which is your onboarding funnel. So the funnel concept never ends. It just kind of moves.
I feel like you created this before for Nido, right? You had an image or an infographic that you created, the parent journey. Do you have that available?
Is that this?
No, it was like it was beautifully made, had Nido on it. I wonder if I pull it up.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think Stephen Hudson made that. Oops. Let me just do this.
Sorry to throw you for a loop there, but
no, that's okay.
I mean, I think that's almost life cycle. Was it that? No, I'll have to find it and show you, and then we can send it out. But it's really good because it brings, like, here's the action item, here's what you offer. It's the same funnel that you have all the way through enrollment.
Okay. I'm interested in that. That sounds vaguely familiar, but honestly, I don't remember where it is.
You sent it to the design team.
Okay.
We'll get it.
I'll go through the design queue. I was hesitant. I was actually going to do something like this specifically for Montessori schools, but I was hesitant to present it because every school is so different. I didn't want to say like, here's what your admission funnel should be.
Sure. Yeah, well, and it was interesting when I was talking with Lise from, preparing for our call last week. She has a different order of the funnel. And it just, it spoke to every school is different. And really this process of creating funnels is actually, the process alone is really eye-opening. And I know Heidi's on this call right now, and she's going through some amazing processes and looking at all different angles with the school. And a lot of opportunities are being discovered in this. So use this as a framework for your developing marketing, and always change it, right? Like recalibrate when you're figuring out what's working, what's not, because that's really going to give you the foundation.
Well, and that's such an important point, Deneen, that honestly I didn't think to bring up, but it's the recalibration that makes your funnel work. So all too often we build something that, is an automated process, or not even automated, but is a process. And then the process, you go through step 1 and you go through step 2, and then it breaks at step 3. And so you ditch the process because you're flying blind, or, just flying by the seat of your pants. And we don't go back to the process. And the real key here, the discipline, is going back and fixing step 3 so that break doesn't happen again. But then it's going to happen again. So step 3 will be fine, and then step 4 breaks. And we just have to keep doing that. And if we can remain disciplined,
like a workout, right? Like if you're not always going to be motivated, but you need to be disciplined to get where you need to get. And like, I see that same process that needs to happen with these types of things, because when you go through a really intensive, gruesome process of figuring out all of your strategic planning, it's almost like when you come out of it, it's like, oh, I'm tired. I don't want to ever do that again. Like,
right.
It's just so much work, but you do have to maintain it. And it's going to be less and less work if you keep nurturing it and watering it, so you can keep it healthy.
Well, and if this is well documented, this is something that scales. And I think that's really important for Montessori schools, because Montessori as a model doesn't scale very well. And that's a compliment, because it's so child focused and every child is so unique. That's a hard thing to scale. How do you scale the uniqueness of a child? You can't. You can scale like the Prussian education system, where we put kids in a row and ring bells and make them do homework. That scales. But because Montessori as a model doesn't scale exceptionally well in many areas, the facets that do scale, we should scale as much as we can. And this is something that allows you to, if you had a really well-defined system, now you can bring in an assistant admissions director, or you could go on vacation, maybe, let's say, and somebody else could step in and follow your notes and do the things that you're doing. This is the type of thing that would really help you, expand and grow, I think, assuming that was a school's goal.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you also have something you created. I don't know if it's in the member section yet, but gosh, I don't remember what it's called. It's like a life cycle, Montessori life something, and you've got many tabs. You know what I'm talking about?
No, is that the thing that we were working on with Heidi?
Maybe, but it like maps out different stages that a school goes through. Shoot, I'm coming up with all these assets. I'm like, I swear you have them. They're somewhere. Because you always like to map out these things, which are super valuable, by the way. Like this just, I love how your brain works.
Not this, right? Something else?
No, it's an actual document. I think it's a Google Doc.
Oh, it's a Google Doc. I'll go find that too. So what am I'm looking for? I'm looking for the Montessori family life cycle.
Yeah, the infographic that you created, I think, a few months ago. And that is very similar to a funnel.
What's this one, a Google Doc?
Yeah, it's like the Montessori life cycle or life document. I know life was in it.
I'll look for both. If I can find them, I'll put them in the description of this video. So if you're watching the recording, you'll see it. And if you're live, forgive us that you're watching the sausage be made as we speak. I wanted to touch briefly on the way that Nido does intake, because this is a really important part of the funnel. I think that in terms of where the actual funnel lives, this is where we're moving people through these steps. So from interest through consideration and intent to evaluation. I have this mildly color-coded. Our blue lead magnets, let's say, tend to be further at the top of the funnel. And then the green is closer to the middle or bottom of the funnel. So if somebody fills out a quiz, is Montessori right for your child? If they download a lead magnet, they fill out the contact form in some way, subscribe, then they're probably at the top of the funnel. If they're downloading things like tuition rates, then they're closer to evaluation and intent. So what we're doing is we're dropping them into our CRM, and then we're sending them an email nurture, and that email nurture is specific to what it is that they downloaded. And the email nurture always says schedule a tour. So at the end of every email, it says schedule a tour. If you haven't scheduled a tour, we'd love to see you. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to meet you in person. But you're providing value throughout each email too. Once they schedule a tour, these emails stop. So we're not bombing parents with, irrelevant emails. And after they've scheduled a tour, that gets added to your calendar, it gets added to their calendar, and now we put them in our pre-tour nurture until the tour is complete, and then we put them in our post-tour nurture. This seems really simple, and it is. But if it's done effectively and correctly, we could automate the top end of the admissions funnel to where you just wake up one day and you've got, these calendar appointments, I've got these tours today, and I don't have to do much of anything outside of the things that are part of my process. I believe that we could save a lot of schools quite a bit in the way of headache and heartache by just employing these really simple models. I'm going to pause there, Deneen. Any input on that one?
No, it's absolutely right. And I know a lot of our members do that, and it's been transformative for them. Because, when you really think about, well, now this is taken care of, you can put your energy where you are best served, right? So this process can either bog you down or lift you up. And I think once you automate it, then you're really able to spend time on the relationship, right? And finding the families that are going to fit so well for your school, because now you have the time and the energy. Because you're only human and you can only do so many things. So let's make the things that are not fun and not human automated. Make a computer do it so then you can actually do the relationship piece.
You just said the smartest thing in the world too that I really love. People get repelled by automation because they think oh, I don't want to do that. That'll sterilize everything. And now, I believe in human in contact and whatever. And what you just said is exactly right. We automate the computer things. We automate the things that should be automated so we can focus on the human element. So much of the reason that, everybody thought in the 20s and 30s that computers were just going to explode human productivity, and they have in some ways, but in many ways they've fallen short because we spend so much time servicing the computer. It hasn't actually been able to take that much off of our plate because the time that we have saved is now, spent updating operating systems and figuring out why this thing isn't working and integrating plugins. And when you do automate the things that should be automated, it doesn't remove the human element, it amplifies it. And I think that was really well stated.
Yeah. Well, and what's so neat too is that I feel like the admissions funnel, really understanding the admissions funnel gives you the ability to make decisions on where they're at in the process. If you understand how they make the decision, then you can automate all of these pieces because you know that that's a typical decision-making tree, right? That's how that works. And so then you can insert yourself into the process when you know this is the time that I need to be focusing on the relationship, because I know they have all this information now. I know this is where they're at in their process making and decision making. So let me spend time here versus all the other places.
It shows you where things hurt. Having a process allows you to identify the pain points where you get to go back and fix it. If you have a bunch of leads coming in and they're not closing, and you can find out why, you get to bring that up in the very beginning. Goodness, I got a bunch of people that aren't closing because we don't have aftercare. Well, then A, we either add an aftercare program, or B, if that's not possible, then let's go to the very tippy top of the funnel and say, hey, by the way, just so you know, you might not be a right fit if you really need aftercare. Save everybody time, effort, energy, and money. But you can't fix a process that doesn't exist. So first, the process has to be built. And in the very beginning, it's just bullet points. Just map out the bullet points for yourself. Don't let my chart overwhelm anybody. Just step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and then you'll start to kind of build on those, and then you'll have your own chart. But that's how they start. I wanted to make a sales point, if I don't get in trouble. I've actually referenced this before. This is our pitch deck for Solutions 8, and I do something super sneaky. So I've got my 5 steps to Google Ads success. And when I'm dealing with a prospect, I present this to them and say, look, these are the 5 things that we need to do in order to make sure that you're successful with Google. And that's all I say. And you'll notice that you've got these little bullet points here, and these are all bullet points. These are things you need to do. And I expect and actually kind of hope that overwhelms you a little bit. Like, oh gosh, here's 5 more things I need to do. And then I run through all these slides, and there's 40 of them. And when we get to the bottom, I say, all right, so going back to our 5 steps, and this ends up being animated when it works. I check step number 1, and then I check step number 2, and I say, we've already done your complete market analysis, so that's done. Oh, and by the way, we defined your launch strategy and that's done. So now we're on step number 3. Is this something you'd like help with? And what's so cool about this is you're 50% of the way there with me. Every other agency, you got to go. Now, is that technically true? Are we much further along than you would be with another agency? I don't know, but it sure looks like it. And people don't like not checking bubbles. That is a fact. So seeing this, you don't want to see it incomplete. And I feel like Montessori schools could do the exact same thing. Like and you want to tell people, that's the other piece that's really important about processes. Don't build a process and then don't tell people it exists. It's not a secret. Nobody's going to be offended. Let them know. By the way, here's our proven process. I like using that word, by the way, proven process. That just, again, establishes you a thought leader. These are the steps that we know you need to go. Everybody who's ever been successful in our school, they've all gone through these steps. And there's 5 of them. You have to do these 5 things. They're really, really important. And by the way, you've already done 2. Like the minute you say 5, it's like, oh goodness, I have to do these 5. And I don't like tests and I don't know how this is going to be. And then you're like, oh, you've already done 2. And there's just something about that that just instantly lifts the weight off and makes you feel like you've already kind of committed. And when people feel like they've already kind of committed, they feel stupid not going further because there's this like, well, I've already gone this far. Why would I stop? So in as much as it's worth and in as much as this is possible, I brought this concept up before, but I really think that this would be powerful for Montessori schools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I love it. Oh my gosh. Well, I know you were working on a spiral too of like current families, like this is where we're at in the process. Mm-hmm. And again, it's the same concept. Like we've gotten this far, we have this far to go. And so it's really like the call to action to commit to the end, right? We don't like incomplete. And this right now, if they stop, they understand they're stopping because, and it's going to be incomplete when you stop. So that's kind of like a psychological game you're playing with them.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. What we're really doing is we're helping people because a confused mind says no, my favorite sales mantra. And so we're helping people achieve clarity because they want to buy from you. They wouldn't be in your school if they weren't touring, but you need to show them how easy it is. So you'll notice I've got my process. So step 1 is done. Step 2 is done. You'll also notice that I didn't name these in a way that you would be able to figure out my trick. So step 1 and step 2 both feel like things that you're going to need to do at some point. But when I explain, the market analysis is what we did in order to create the action plan. The launch strategy is the action plan I just presented to you. And now we're in the build and launch phase. Now you're like, oh my goodness, okay, that's great. So you might say something to the effect of, you have to have your Montessori learning prerequisite. It's just a necessity. And they're like, what's that? And we're like, well, you're on it. It's the tour. But, it sounded really important when I said it the first time and, like something I'd have to go through and do. But once they've been exposed to it or, your observation period or whatever, the other thing that I like to do is I like to show them exactly what needs to happen. So these are the next steps. You have to review and sign our agreement. You have to complete our strategy form and you have to provide us with access. And you would have the same thing. So a Montessori school might say, hey, the very next step is you filling out an enrollment document. And my favorite words in the whole wide world are, would you like help with that? Because you're asking for the sale, but you're asking for it in the kindest way in existence. And the rule of sales, the golden rule, is you have to ask for the sale. You can't just sit there and you're like, so what do you think? What do you want to do? You have to let them know, hey, I think I'd love to have you at our school. I think we're an excellent fit. The next step would be filling out an enrollment document. Is that something you'd like help with? And what you just did is force them to make a binary decision, yes or no. Because if you say the next step's an enrollment document, here it is, I hope to hear from you. Well, you're letting them off the hook in a lot of ways. You want to say, would you like help with that? And they can say no. And they're like, no, it's okay. We're going to go home and look over this. Absolutely understood. I'm here whenever you need me. But if they say yes, sit down and help them with the enrollment document. Like, let's fill out some paperwork and not get too snooty about our role in life. How is this, Danina? Is this helpful? Should I move on?
No, this is great. Absolutely. Do you have some other stuff you wanted to share with us?
I do. Is this going too long?
No, I mean, we're at 50 minutes, so we probably could do another 10.
Okay, I'll be quick. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns, or confessions coming in? Am I boring anybody to death? I feel like everybody's asleep right now. If this were a TV show, you would like cut to all these people just asleep at their desk.
Or just taking copious notes. And there's
And then somebody else would see them asleep and be like, oh, they're on the Nido webinar. They would know.
Okay, we've got one question from Gabby. She says, so are you suggesting that we go through the application form with parents at the tour?
I think so, yes. And the reason for that is because a lot of it is legalese, and there's questions there that they're going to have questions about. One of the things that comes up a lot is image release, for instance. This happened with my wife and I. We didn't understand the image release, and it actually stopped us from submitting the enrollment form. You might not want to go through line by line on a granular level. What I don't want you to do is sit down at a desk across from them. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because psychologically you've placed a barrier in front of them, you've sat across them, which means we're now combatants. And in this zone, we're enemy combatants in this thing where I'm trying to take your money. So if you ever need to sit down right next to them. And know where that is, by the way. That's part of your process. None of this should be left to chance. You know what table you're going to. You know what chairs you're sitting in. You know that the chair isn't seated somewhere where the light's going to come in and hurt their eyes, that type of thing. Like, it sounds manipulative. It's not at all. It's just thinking this process through so that they're comfortable and you're removing all the barriers. And then if you are going over the enrollment agreement with them, which I strongly recommend, I go through my contract with every client that ever signs up. You don't want to go through line by line by line by line. You want to say, these are the 5 questions most parents have. And there's something about that that's really helpful, because it lets people know, like, okay, I'm not the only one that would have questions about these possibly. So, parents have questions about the image release. Parents have questions about the late pickup. Parents have questions about the car line. And you go over those. And then what you might want to do is have an excuse to excuse yourself and say, look, I need to go make copies of whatever. I need to make copies of the shot documents. What are those called? The vaccination charts. I need to go and figure out this thing. So I'll be right back. Why don't y'all take 10 minutes and look over this? And when I come back, you can let me know if you have any questions. And really what you just did is give them the opportunity to sign right there and then. And your proactive A-type parents are going to have the whole thing filled out by the time you come back. And the ones that aren't, that's okay. They really do need the time. But yeah, I think sitting down and walking through them, I know it's so tedious and you just want to get out of there and move on to the next tour, but it's really worth your time. I think 15 minutes spent at that process saves you 3 hours of follow-up later. Is that a good answer, Gabby?
And you also, you get them when you strike when the iron is hot, right? Like that's what you were saying. But it's doing it in a way that checks that off their list too, right? So when they walk out the door with a bunch of papers, like it's probably going to end up in their bag and it's going to be there for weeks, right? Which may be why it's taking them so long. They may still be excited, but that time has gone by. And so now it becomes this like tedious thing versus this like celebration that they've now chosen your school for their family. You know what I'm saying?
Can I tell you a story about the papers in your bag? So I wanted to work with, call it a business coach kind of, but it was this consultancy that did this program. And I went and I did the free consult, and I was sold, and they gave me paperwork to fill out, and I put it in my laptop, and it ended up getting crumpled with a copy stain because of the way that my life manifested itself that day. And so I took it out and it was crumpled, and I was bummed about that, but then I ended up getting copy stain, and I went to their website and I couldn't get another copy. And I didn't sign up for that course because I didn't want to go back in there looking like I was inept, having had, I know that sounds so stupid, but that's just people, and so the fewer opportunities we can give them to crumple the paper with copy stains, I think the better we're equipped to make sure that they can potentially convert. So yeah, exactly what you were just saying. I just wanted to me too that moment.
Yeah. All right, Sally, so she said, this is very, very helpful. I follow StoryBrand and find this process so overwhelming, and I imagine many of us do, right? Like there's so much information, there's a wave of things to take in and a big giant long to-do list, right? Mm-hmm. So Qasim, I'm gonna put this on you, and I'm actually curious to hear what others would say. I've been trying to convince you to go on the road and help people with this process. So Sally and everybody on here, let's all convince Qasim that we should be doing these type of like workshops with you so the overwhelm can go away, right? And we can really like get this down. Because obviously we do these coaching calls and they're really fun and they're really engaging. And we do them every week and we want to help you with this process, but it's so individual. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would be so neat, Qasim, if we could do that, like go to different cities and help people through these 12 steps.
I'd love to do. I'm actually interested, having heard that, whether or not the attendees, if everybody, that's something that you would go to.
She said, Heidi said, I think enrollment season is a hard time to improve process. I think summer is a better time. So
we should probably do our road tour in the summers and just go city to city and spend a day chopping it up with schools and helping them. I'd love to do that. I'm afraid of it, to be honest with you, because I don't know what I don't know yet. And there's just something about setting off on that journey without all the answers that worries me. But that's honestly what I'm telling schools to do here too. Like building your process, you're building a bridge as you cross it. So we should do that. I'm committed to doing that before the end of 2020. I want to do at least one, and then hopefully have like a series for it. So yeah, let's definitely do it.
Yeah, cool. Sally, I'm curious to know too, what specific things that feel overwhelming. And she says, please, I have so much to do, but teaching takes up so much time. Yes, a small school is so pressed for time. Yeah.
So some advice there though, just in terms of the overwhelm, Sally, is because we are building this bridge as we cross it, don't build it all at once, because everybody looks at a process like it's an assembly line. And in an assembly line, you have to build from the beginning, because an assembly line, like, you know, if you don't build everything, then you don't get the car on the other end. It's not that at all. You're already doing all of this by hand manually anyway. Define just your core architecture. So call it the skeleton, which is just the bullet points we talk about. Just bullet point the steps that people go through, and then choose one. And it doesn't have to be the first one. As a matter of fact, it's generally not the first one. Choose one step that you look at and you know, like, oh, I could automate that. And automate, by the way, doesn't mean anything technical. It just means I have all my papers. I know exactly what steps I do this in, and I know what the process is. You put it on a sticky note. Write it on a sticky note. So you have your enrollment agreement, and then just write on a sticky note. This is how I'm going to go hand enrollment agreement to parents, go through with parents. This is my process. And now that's done, and highlight that one off your list because you just did it. And in doing that, what's really cool about it is you're going to have hub and spoke in your processes. So you just have the major hub there, which is the enrollment agreement. And then you're going to start to kind of have these little offshoots, which is like, well, gosh, if I'm already doing that, I can probably have a process for this. And the minute you have a preface where it's like, well, you know what would be really cool is if I got this first, then I could do this thing. And bam, you just launched yourself off into the next thing that you're going to automate. So don't overwhelm just yet. Go choose the one thing, and it doesn't have to be the first thing. Go choose the one thing that's the easiest for you to build a process around right now, and do that. And then just start using that process and start bidding it up. And then from there, it'll slowly expand and grow.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing. She said the organizing and where to start. So I think you answered that really well. Sally, I'd be curious to hear if there's anything more that you're struggling with. And then Heidi mentioned, Qasim, can you have a low-hanging fruit list of changes you recommend to schools?
Yes, I'll have a better list when I actually do the roadshow we're talking about, because so much of what we do with schools, it actually marks me as a hypocrite, because I say, here's what I recommend, and schools say, that sounds really smart, we don't have time. And then it falls flat. I think that the fact that we just launched the CRM is going to change a lot of that. So in case you don't know, if you're a third or fourth plan member, you have access to our Montessori CRM and marketing automation tool. And at some point, this will automate a massive amount of the steps that Montessori schools take, not just for admissions, but for enrollment and for alumni and tracking and events. It's going to be amazing. I'm really excited about it. I've shown some schools. We have it deployed from schools. The feedback, everything is phenomenal, but it's a lot of work. And so right now, Heidi, I think I'm going to be a fence sitter, if you don't mind, and maybe put that question on a shelf, because I know what I think my low-hanging fruit would be, but having not deployed it, I would be guessing. And I just know, having done what I've done for 15 years now, I'm so old, I will be wrong when I guess. I'm more often than I am. So what I need to do is I need to deploy this for schools and then figure out, like, oh goodness, that was so hard. People pushed back on that a lot, but this was easy and it made a really big impact. And if you're interested in being a guinea pig with the Montessori CRM, incidentally, it's not going to stay at the third plane. We are going to roll it out, but if you sign up now and are a third plane member, we're going to grandfather you in forever. And so now's the time. You're going to have to put up with a bunch of I don't knows, but you're also going to get a ton of hand holding from me. And when we roll it off of the third plane, because it's, you know, a slightly elevated offering, then you'll be on it and you'll have access to it in perpetuity. So if that's not a good sales pitch, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions on that one.
Cool. Yay. Well, this was such a good call. And we hit on so many really good topics, and just like really hitting home the importance of your funnels, right? I think you articulated that really well, and being able to understand like the purpose of a funnel too, and that it can be fluid in all of your processes, you know, and really figuring that out, but making sure that you follow those processes and don't veer, because that just creates more work for you in the end.
Right. Oh, does anybody want to be in the hot seat next week? We'll hot seat somebody and we will build your funnel with you, for you on the phone. We'll walk through and you'll get, the last folks that did it, Emily.
Yep.
Yeah. Emily, she got a very significant thank you present from Nido Marketing. And we're going to do the exact same thing. So it's going to be big. And hopefully worth your time and, you know, the embarrassment that is getting up in front of people live on video.
Yeah, Sally said she would.
Oh, did she really?
Yes, Sally said yes to the hot seat. So we got somebody on board.
That is so cool. Sally, I'm so excited. We're going to reach out to you. Do we have your email? I'm sure we do somewhere. I know it exists.
Yes.
And
then Heidi mentioned seeing the horizontal and vertical was really helpful.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Heidi. I need to clean that graphic up. That's sort of something that we use internally. So I should have had something cleaner for the call. I just didn't have time. Yeah, and for our live attendees, thank you so much for showing up live. I mean, you really impact these calls and the value of the calls. So, and if you're watching the recording, that's perfectly fine. I'm not poking you in the ribs, but if you ever do want to show up live, we do this every Thursday. It's 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Just go to nidomarketing.com/coaching. You can watch live on Facebook. We don't respond to any of the questions there. So you got to come to the coaching call if you want to interact live. And then you get to do things like the hot seat and volunteer. And sometimes we do fun little giveaway stuff. But yeah, this was a good call. I appreciate everybody showing up, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Lise, special call with Lise on Tuesday. Please do join. So she was with us last week, and we were talking about the funnel, but we realized that we really want to pick her brain about admissions strategy. So she's going to join us on Tuesday. She's going to answer any of the questions that you have, and I imagine we have a long list of questions because that's always a tricky one. Admissions processes and strategies. It goes hand in hand with marketing, but also how can we make our processes work for us so we're not spending so much time and we're really enrolling the families that we know are going to be successful at our school. So please join us Tuesday. I think it's at 10:30 Pacific. So it's the same time we do coaching calls, just on Tuesday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 Eastern time.
And she's wicked smart. I mean, their school, I went and got to visit it when I was in St. Louis, and it's so polished. I mean, it blew me away. It was so inspiring.
Yeah, she's only been there for 2 years. I mean, she's been a parent. But yeah, and even Kim has only been there for a couple of years. So they've done some amazing things in a matter of 2 years. So if that doesn't give you hope, people, I don't know what does. Like it's fantastic. They've done some amazing things. So do join us Tuesday. And of course, every Thursday we're here too.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care.